Temple of Thoth, the House of the Net. There are many mentions of mystical and magical nets within the ancient mythologies. There is an alternative name for the Temple of Thoth, also known as Khemennu, or the City of Eight. It was also named Ḥet Ȧbtit, or the House of the Net, a very curious expression. From a chapter contained within the ritual, however, we learn that there was a mysterious net, which, as Wallis E Budge states, was supposed to exist in the Underworld, and that the deceased regarded it with horror and detestation. Every part of it, its poles, ropes, weights, small cords, and hooks, all had names which he was obliged to learn if he wished to escape from it, and make use of it to catch food for himself, instead of being caught by those who laid snares. Interpreting this from the mystical standpoint of the doctrine of rebirth, of the rising from the dead, that is to say, of the spiritual resurrection, of those who had died to the darkness of their lower natures, and had become alive to the light of spiritual life, and this too while alive in the body, and not after the death of this physical frame. I would venture to suggest that this net was the symbol of a certain condition within the inner nature of the conventional life of the world, which shut in the man into the limitations of the conventional life of the world, and shut him off from the memory of his true self. The poles, ropes, weights, small cords, and hooks were symbols of the autonomy and physiology, so to say, of the physical body, carapace, or egg, or envelope of the soul. The normal man was enmeshed in this engine of fate. The man who received the mind inverted this net, so to speak, transmuted and transformed it so that he could catch food for himself. Come ye after me, and I will make you fishers of men. The food with which Christ nourishes his body is supplied by men. Thus in prayer, in the chapter of the ritual, we read, "Hail, thou God, God who lookest behind me, God who hast gained the mystery over thine heart." I go fishing with the cordage, net of the uniter of earth, and of him that maketh the way through the earth. Hail, ye fishers, who have given birth to your own fathers, who lay snares with your nets, who go round about in the chambers of the waters. Take ye not me in the net, wherewith ye ensnare the helpless fiends. And rope me not, wherewith ye rope the abominable fiends of the earth. And weighted parts that rested upon the earth. The little man says to the great man within him, Lift thyself up, O thou Ra, who dwellest in the divine shrine. Draw thou unto thyself the winds, inhale the north wind, and swallow thou the Perquesu of thy net, on the day wherein thou breathest Ma'at. suggests the inbreathing or inspiration of truth and righteousness. The Holy Ghost, the Holy Breath, or Life, the spouse of the ordering mind, or Logos. The winds are presumably the four great cosmic currents of the divine breath, the north wind being the down breath of the great sphere. The term Bekwasu has not yet been deciphered. It could mean knots, but the swallowing of the net seems to suggest the transformation of it, inwardly digesting of it, in such a fashion that the lower is set free and becomes one with the higher. And that this idea of the net is very ancient, especially in its macrocosmic significance, is evidenced by the parallel of the Assyrian and Babylonian versions of the great fight between the sun god Marduk and the chaotic Mother Tiamat and her titanic demonic powers of disordered motion and instability. Both Egyptian and Babylonian traditions probably being derived from the same primitive common source. Again, in relation to Tiamat and Marduk, he, Marduk, set lightning in front of him. With burning fire he filled his body. He made a net to enclose the inward parts of Tiamat. The four winds he set, so that nothing of her might escape, the south and the north wind, and the east wind and the west wind, he brought near to the net, which his father Anu had given him. But as I have said before, there is something wrong with this narrative. It is not Tiamat at all. It is the Anzu bird, a figure who took many other names, for example Zu and Pazuzu, and also Mullil, which is the oldest name for Enlil, meaning the father of Marduk, is actually the same figure he is trying to snare in this later story. Food for thought. This can only confuse those who deeply accept story, without understanding that the words have power, meaning they have purpose, to demonize the original god and take its place. Now in the hymns of the popular Hermes cult, found in the Greek magic papyri, one of the most famous forms of address to Hermes is, O thou of the four winds. Moreover, we may compare it with the rope with which the fishers rope the abominable fiends of the earth. In the passage of Athenagoras, in which he tells us concerning the mysteries of the mythos, ran that Zeus, after dismembering his father, pursued his mother, who refused his marriage. But she, having assumed a serpent form, he also assumed the same form, and having bound her with what is called the noose of Hercules, was joined with her. And the symbol of this transformation is the rod of Hermes. Here it is again, the symbolic caduceus, which represents equilibrium between the opposite forces. It is the power of Thoth that binds and loosens. He holds the keys of heaven and hell, of life and death. It is further quite evident that Athenagoras is referring to a Hellenistic form of the mysteries, in which the influence of Egypt is dominant. The noose of Hercules is thus presumably the noose of Ptah. Now Ptah is the creator or generator of his noose or tie, is probably the Ankhtai or symbol of life, the familiar crux ansata, of which the older form is a twisted rope, probably representing the binding together of male and female life in generation. Ptah is also the god of fire. We should not forget that it is Hephaestus, in Greek myth, who catches Aphrodite and Ares in a net, which he has cunningly contrived, at which the gods laughed in high Olympus. In the list of the titles of the numerous works belonging to the cycle of Orphic literature, one is called the Veil, and the other is called the Net. In the Pan-Athenaea, veil, web, or robe of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, was borne aloft like the sail of a galley, but this was a symbol only of the mysteries. Mystically, it signifies the veil of the universe, studded with stars, the many-coloured veil of nature. There is also the famous veil or robe of Isis that no mortal or dead man has raised. For the veil has the spiritual nature of man himself, and to raise it he had to transcend the limits of individuality, break the bonds of death, and so become consciously immortal. Eschenbach III is thus quite correct in another of its aspects. He refers to this veil to the famous net of Vulcan. Moreover, Aristotle, quoting the Orphic writings, speaks of the living creature born in the webs of the net. While Photius tells us that the book of Dionysius Eginesis, entitled Netting or Concerning Nets, treated of the generation of mortals. And Plato himself likens the entwining of the nerves, veins and arteries to the network of a basket or a bird cage, because bird is the word. All of which, I think, shows that Thoth's Temple of the Net must have had some more profound significance to its name. That it was a building in which the emblem of a net, or perhaps the net itself, was venerated, as Budge lamely surmises. This would be similar to the net of Mamit in ancient Mesopotamia. This magical net was laid to snare a demon. But there is deception in the air. The joker, the fool. Mamit may actually be Mumu Momis, meaning the snare was laid by the same entity it was allegedly designed to catch and retain. In listing the figures relating to the net, we may reveal a pattern. Thoth, house of the net. Hermes, O thou of the four winds. Marduk, net given by Anu. Zeus, noose of Hercules, which is the rod of Hermes. The famous veil, web or robe of Athena, and Athena is said to be Zeus in female form. One is called the veil and the other the net. The famous veil or robe of Isis, the net of Vulcan, and of course the net of Mamit. The entity of many names can be attributed to all the forementioned positions, and a pattern is defined by something that happens more than once. This is a repeated pattern throughout the ages. My concern with the net of Mamit is that it has a very different purpose. In fact, it was laid to catch the darkness. It is a trap laid for it, the entity. What you will see as this series develops is there was a figure called it, much like Voldemort in the Harry Potter series. It had no name, nor was given one, for good reason. As you will learn, the dark arts arose in Eridu, as did the Anunnaki pantheon. From here, we will gain a deeper understanding of its development. Tiamat and Apsu were the same names for the same god in different regions. Apsu was then written in myth as a male figure. It is worth noting that this Apsu then becomes a representation of the god of sarcasm. Sarcasm deified, which speaks volumes. These then have a son, Momis or Mamu, a name which at one time seems to have been given to Tiamat, created by the hand of a later mythographer, who has taken upon himself the responsibility of manufacturing 3 new deities out of one original. The one god has become thrice great. Momis is the fool, the joker, Mr. Sarcasm. All will be understood, one step at a time. Please hit that notification bell to ensure that you are notified of each upload. Share, like, comment and subscribe to support the channel for more ancient mystery.